We're live.
Hey y'all, I'm James Wright and welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be talking about joints. I have made lots and lots of joints over the years and have done many live videos actually showing off individual types of joints and different ways of doing them. And one of the questions I always get is I'm doing some piece of furniture and I want to take this board and I want to put it into this board. What joint should I use? And I want to go through some of these joints and talk through pros and cons and where they'd be used and why you would use them. And then I want to talk a little bit about the psychology of joints so that we can figure out where does this joint actually want to be used, because you have to get your mindset into the joint itself. So we're having a little bit of fun with this tonight. A couple things coming up. Number one, the peach meet down in Georgia, the peach meet, is going to be, if I remember correctly, it's the first Saturday of February. So it's actually coming up pretty quickly. And I had someone actually offer to pay for my flight down there. So I may end up coming down for the peach meet. The only thing is I need someone to drive me from the airport to the meet itself, and then possibly have some place to stay while I'm there. So if anyone has an answer for that, please let me know. But yeah, I'll be flying, it looks like I'm flying down into Atlanta and then going from there. So yeah, if anyone's going to the peach meet, let me know. I'd like to see you. I was there last year and it is a great 2-day long tool meet. So if you are down south, that is the absolute best place to buy tools. People will literally come from all over the south, from as far north as like Washington D.C. down to Florida and into Texas. People will be driving all those distances to get to the peach meet because it is the place to buy hand tools down south, and it happens once a year in February. Oh, and also on top of that, I got a my letter is missing. I got my letter in the mail from the Pacific Northwest Tool Collectors. They have the next meet coming out, the Best in the West, which is, it's honestly the best place to buy hand tools in the West. Happens on the West Coast once every 2 years. I was there last year and it will be coming up this next year. I think it's August of 2020. So they just put out the dates for that and started setting that up. So I would like to go out to that one, but again, we will see. I don't know. So if you are out on the West Coast, definitely look up the Pacific Northwest Tool Collectors and get out to that tool meet. It is a phenomenal, phenomenal meet. And some of the best tool displays I've ever seen happen out there. Oh, one other note. I got a hair in my mouth. That was weird. I am working on making a tool tote right now, and it will be an upcoming video. And I've had this weird idea in my brain that I want to actually do lives and I want to actually work through a project rather than just talking about joints, is every so often grab a project and work through that step by step. And I've got another hair in my mouth. Where do these hairs keep coming from? Stop kissing my wife.
The hair is here. It's not like a mustache.
I don't know what you're talking about. So I want to actually do some projects and take us through this. I've decided I'm going to experiment.
Pause.
Okay, I'm pausing.
You have a super chat.
Oh,
they're asking for a dad joke.
A dad joke.
Digimer?
What's that?
Says, please, sir, could I have a dad joke?
Let me grab the dad joke.
I don't
book.
do accents, so please don't ask me.
I do not have a dad joke off the top of my head. Ooh, but we do have the dad joke book, so let me open this up.
I'll have to steal it back now.
Yes, the ultimate dad joke. What did the baby corn say to the mama corn? Where's the papa corn?
No.
Thank you for the super chat.
Groan.
So what I want to actually do is I'm going to be making a tool tote. I have a video of making a tool tote with my daughter. That was a fun one. But I actually want to do one and take it step by step. And this one I'm actually going to make one ahead of time. and I'm going to make the plans for it and really figure out exactly what I want to do for this and make it a bang up actual program where we'll go through this. And I'll have the plans available on my website before we actually start this, so that you can go out and buy the lumber you need, get the plans, and then can follow through step by step with the live build. We're actually going through a bunch of different things. So if you're wanting to figure out some of these joints and how to do them and doing them along with me, this will be your opportunity. So you can actually be in the live, doing it yourself while watching me, and then throw up questions in the live as things come along. So I'm going to kind of play with this idea and see how it goes. The reason I'm picking a tool tote is we're actually going to be doing angled dovetails. We're going to be doing a rabbeted bottom. We're going to be putting a drawer in there. We're going to be doing some wood bending. We're going to bend a handle for it. We'll also be doing some resawing and some other things like that that will be interesting techniques that you can go together and make this. I'm going to make it in such a way that you can change it to fit your style fairly easily. But it should be an interesting project, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. So that is a lot of intro, but for those of you who are new, this is kind of the way we go, except for it's normally not quite this long an intro. So let's actually get into some joints. Anything we need before missing?
Digimer likes the daddy-daughter project idea.
Yeah, I want to do more with that. I had another project I was going to do, but with this whole YouTube kids thing, I'm still trying to figure out exactly how to do that with my own kids in the shop, because there are some legal issues I have to work around now, having kids in my shop. That's just crazy. So we'll see how that comes out. But here we've got some joints. So I'm going to flip over this and show you some of these closer up. These are mostly joints that I have done over the years in live, and they go from everything from the simple dovetail, like, let me put these in focus here. Focus, there we go. We got a simple through dovetail to a half blind dovetail, and then that can then go into some other more fancy things like a houndstooth dovetail. And then we can get into the, I want to call them Jamaican dovetails. Triangle. What's the where planes crash? The Bermuda dovetails, which this is a really bad design, but I did it live, so it was pretty quick. We've got the Knapp joint, and like finger joints and things like that. But these are all more or less modifications of the same type of joint. It's what happens when you take two boards and you want them together at 90 degrees, and you want them together like that. So you can miter them, you can dovetail them, and there's a lot of different applications. We'll be getting into that. We're also going to be talking about these where you want one board for the grain to be going across the other, meeting at 90 degrees. And then I've got this one, which we did a while ago. This is 9 different joints, the joinery window, and we go through a whole bunch of these. So these will actually be several other ways of doing it, of a half lap dovetail. We have a splined joint. We have a drawbore mortise and tenon. We have a bridle joint. We've got the half, what is it called, the mitered bridle joint. We've got a simple half lap. We've got a middle half lap. We've got the pocket hole, and there was just the simple mortise and tenon. And so then we've got other things like this. What if you want a board to end grain into something? And so how do you actually do a tenon into that? And even like this one down here, we've got mortise and tenon, but with the not houndstooth. Wow, I'm having problems tonight. tusked tenon. You can see the tusk going through here. The houndstooth. Yeah, we have, these are houndstooth. Houndstooth dovetails. So
I was thinking more of the black and white pattern.
So the question then comes, which joint do you use in which situation? With so many joints out there, how do you actually choose and figure this out? Whoop, cord stuck. So I have to really kind of back up and say, the first thing you have to do when looking at a joint is understand that there is no right joint for the job. You're going to have books and people who tell you whenever you have these two boards coming together in this particular application, this is the joint you should use because this is the traditional right way to do it. Whenever you hear someone say that, go, oh yeah, okay. Because they're talking about it from a specific standpoint. In a specific tradition and a specific location and time, that was the joint that was commonly used. And it was probably because it's a very good joint for that location. Does that mean that's the best joint for it? No, there are other joints that will work just as well. There are different joints that are more fancy than others. There's some that hide the cover, and there's different ways about it. So just understand that there is no right joint. So how do you actually go about figuring out what joint to use when two boards come together? You have to start and think about the physics involved. So here we have our basic dovetail, which, let me see if I can get this one apart. We have a dovetail here. Two boards coming together at 90 degrees, perpendicular to each other, perpendicular or in the same plane as each other. The nice thing about a dovetail joint is when it goes together, it is locked in all directions except for one. So these two boards are not going to shear away from each other this way. They're not going to shear away from it. I'm not going to be able to take this one and pull it out because it's mechanically held in place there. The only way where it's weak is for this board to come out this way because the tails lock it in place. And so you can actually fix that by then putting in a third piece of wood and pinning in the tails so that they can't slide out. And there's a bunch of other things you can do like that. But in the case of a drawer, so let's assume this is the corner of a drawer, all of the weight is going vertical in the drawer. In the bottom, there is a bottom to the drawer that's holding it down. Nothing is ever pulling this side out. And if it is in a dresser, the dresser itself is going to be holding that side in so the side of the board can't come out. So this becomes a great joint because the dresser is holding these two side boards in place. The front board can't pull off. It is a functional joint that fits that position well. Now on my dresser, I actually rotated the box because I really wanted to mess with people's brains. And so now the front is the mechanical disadvantage because you'd be pulling on the front. There's a theory that you could pull the drawer off. But in this case, I'm trusting the glue because the glue is actually surprisingly good. And you're going to have a lot of people out there who tell you don't ever trust the glue. If you have a joint that's held together with glue, it's a bad joint. No, it means that, 50, 100 years down the road, that joint may fail, in which case then you can glue it back together. Or it may be that there really isn't that much stress. And in the case of those dresser drawers, there really isn't that much stress. And with how thick I made the sides, there is a lot of connection between them, so I don't have to worry about it that much. So then the next thing we have to think about is, okay, we can talk about drawers with dovetails, and dovetails have a plethora of different methods. So, I mean, we've got houndstooth and bohemian, and not bohemian, what was the word I used earlier? Triangle. Bermuda dovetails. We've got the Knapp joint. They're all the exact same thing, even though they look differently. They all function the same way. The board can't come off one way, and it can come off the other way. So, though they may look differently, they're all mechanically the exact same joint. And in this case, it matters about how do you want them to look. Do you actually want to be able to see the tails on the outside? Do you want to hide them by doing a half blind so you can't see it? Do you want to hide them completely by doing a full blind dovetail joint? There's a lot of different things that go into the actual look of the joint that don't actually change the function of the joint. So in that case, you're talking about how do you want them to look, not do they work any better, because all of these joints I've mentioned are going to work just as well. But then we can come down to something like the finger joint. And this is a dovetail joint that never quite made it. A finger joint is, rather than it being angled, they're square. And the problem with this is that they can come apart in any direction. So there is no mechanical advantage to this because the board can come off this way and the board can come off this way. But the nice thing about a finger joint is it's very, very easy to do with a power tool. And so they were fairly common, or they are fairly common, because they're quick, they're easy to do, and the glue will hold them together. So just as I was talking about earlier, trusting the glue, in this case, 99.9% of the time, finger joints actually work really, really well as long as you have a nice fit and the glue holds them together. And if you want to see any of these particular joints I'm talking about, I have a live video talking about almost every one of these joints. So if you say Wood by Wright finger joints, search for that, you'll come up on it. And this particular one has proud finger joints. So they're sticking out a little bit past on either side. and that just makes them look a little bit more fun and sharp. So just kind of something different to do that makes them a little bit more difficult on power tools. But that's bringing two boards together. What about if I want the boards, rather than going together like this, what if I want the board to go in like this? And I'm changing the plane. So not only is it out of the plane this way, but it's also out of the plane this way. What happens when I want it to go in there? And in this case, we're going to go to one of the oldest methods in the book, the mortise and tenon. And just like with a dovetail, there are hundreds of types of mortise and tenon. Does the tenon go all the way through the board? Does the tenon stop inside? Is the tenon pinned in place? Is the tenon wedged? Is the tenon split? Is the tenon hidden? Is the tenon round? Is the tenon square? Is the tenon rectangle? Is the tenon octagon? You can make a mortise and tenon in any particular way, other than a mortise is a hole that the tenon can go in. And usually the mortise goes all the way around the tenon and holds it on all sides, but not always the end. So because sometimes the tenon can go through. Oh, Melody's here.
I need help on my devotions.
We'll be up in a little while, Melody. Go get in bed, babe.
We can work on that tomorrow, okay? Let's not do it tomorrow.
So the tenon goes through the board, and historically, this is one of the simplest, easiest ways to connect two boards together. If you size them up to go in, if you get a nice tight joint, the glue works pretty well. The problem is you have these going against the grain, going across the grain. When a board is like this, the expansion and contraction of this board is this way. The board doesn't expand and contract along the grain, it just expands and contracts across the grain. And because both these boards are in the same orientation, both of them are expanding and contracting together. So as one expands, the other expands, so they always stay together. There isn't any tension across them. But if I take one of these boards and I rotate it this way and I put it in this way, now I have a board that's expanding and contracting this way. And as it goes into this, the grain doesn't expand and contract this way, so as it goes in there, this will want to expand and contract, but the hole it's going into won't expand and contract. And that expansion and contraction over the years is going to cause that joint to fail because it is slowly weakening the glue out. And in that case, you generally don't want just a glue because over time it's going to cause some problems. Now, if you have a festool or something like that, the great thing about a festool is that it is a mechanical, it is a press, what's the word I'm looking for? It's an engineered tenon. So the domino that you actually put in doesn't expand and contract as much because it's made of multiple pieces like plywood. So when you put that into place, it doesn't have as much change in it as a normal tenon would. Well, I have to take it back. They do make dominoes that are solid wood, but I don't know why you want to use those rather than an engineered domino. So historically, there were a lot of methods of holding that tenon in place, so when the glue failed, it won't come out. One of the easy ways is put a wedge on the other side, and now it can't come out. One of the next ones is a drawbore tenon, or a pinned tenon. So you have the tenon on this board goes through this board, and then you just put a pin a pin into the tenon so that the tenon can't come out. It's locked in place. Another method is doing a wedged tenon, and this is one of my favorites because it can actually look really good. Although I don't have a whole lot of uses for it. Here you can see the board goes in here, tenon goes all the way through, and then on this side you can drive wedges in there to hold this in place. So you're actually expanding the tenon on this side so it can't pull back out. Or in this case, let me grab this one. In this one we have a blind wedged tenon. So they have wedges that are hidden inside the joint. So when this all goes together, you can't see the tenon coming out the other side. But we had this one cut apart so you can actually see the wedges inside there. Now the next thing is, what if the board rotates one more time? So we've had it in orientation this way, and then we've rotated the board this way. What happens if we rotate the board again this way? Well, now you don't have as much of the expansion contraction point because this way, this board is expanding and contracting this way. this board is expanding and contracting this way. The boards aren't expanding and contracting lengthwise because the grain is going this way. The boards don't expand this way, so it's not a problem. In this case, most of the time just glue works really well because you have a straight long grain to a straight long grain connection. You're not going to be running into the expansion and contraction problems. What you can do is actually create a groove that this then slides into. So you're looking at this point, at which way is the force going to be on this. So if this were a drawer bottom, and so the drawer bottom then goes into the drawer side, all the force will be on the floor. All the force will be trying to push this drawer bottom down. So if you put a groove in there for this to house into, that groove will stop the drawer bottom from coming down. But if it is something, let's see, I've done several with T construction, where this is the supporting member and this is sitting on top of it. And this provides rigidity to the flat surface, so like a table stretcher. In which case, you really don't need much of anything more than glue. Yeah, you can put a small groove for it to fit in that will stop it from shifting this way. But most of the time, gravity is going to hold it in place, and just a little bit of glue will give you a good, strong joint there. But then we have to rotate it one more time. So we had this way, and then we rotate it this way, and then we rotate it this way. So now we're actually going to rotate it one more time and go this way. And here we've got problems because this board wants to expand and contract. This board wants to expand and contract this way. And this board does not want to expand and contract up and down because the fibers are going out. It will expand and contract this way, but not this way. So in this case, this will fail over time because you're going across the grain. This will expand and contract, and this will not. So as this board expands and contracts, it has a problem here. And what if this is the stretcher underneath the table? Half of the stretchers go this way on the table, and half the stretchers go this way on the table. So if this is the stretcher that is underneath the table going this way, now you need a way for this board to be able to slide on top as it expands and contracts. And that's where we've got this. And so in this case, we actually have a sliding dovetail. Let me see if I can show you this. I don't know if you guys can see the dovetail on there. But rather than it just being a board in a groove, the groove has a captured dovetail on it. And what this will allow is it will allow this top to expand and contract throughout the weather. And I don't know if you guys can see this, but right now, this board is sticking up about a 1/16 of an inch past this board, and it's perfectly flush on this side. When I made this board, I made it in the summer, and I put it in there and I actually trimmed this board down nice and flush so that this board was exactly the same length as this board is wide. And now that everything has gotten dry here in the winter, this board has contracted this way and has shown up a 1/16 of an inch here. If I didn't have that sliding dovetail on there, that would be putting stress on the glue, and I would have some glue breakage in here because this is expanding and contracting. And this is just over, about 5.5 inches of board. If this were over a full 2-3 foot wide tabletop, that expansion and contraction would be a 1/16 every even 5.5 inches or so. So you would have a lot of expansion and contraction of that board. That stretcher underneath needs to be able to slide on it. And so I'm saying all of this to try and give you an idea that when you want to pick a joint, it's not best to try and go through a book and find what joint should I use when I put these boards together. Once you understand which way the wood is moving, you can understand the movement the joint has to be able to maintain. And then you also have to think about which way is gravity forcing on this, or which way are people going to be acting on it. Am I using a joint in its mechanical advantage so I can pull on the front of a drawer as opposed to pulling on the side of the drawer? Is it going to be a shelf going into a vertical shelving wall? In which case, the vertical shelving wall, most of the grain is going up and down, and your shelf comes in endways this way. Well, the shelf will be able to expand and contract this way, just as the shelf wall will expand and contract, so these expand and contract together. But if that shelf rotates, then you have to be thinking about the expansion and contraction of the shelf wall against the shelf long grain. So you have to keep all these things in mind and think through what is the mechanical advantage that's going to hold it in place. is glue enough to keep these all together, or do I need something like a dovetail to hold it in place? And whenever you think about glue failing, you need to either think about a pin or think about a dovetail. Those are the two main answers to going cross grain. You're either going to have a dovetail that holds the two boards together in all but one orientation, or you're going to have a third piece that puts a pin through the tenon, or where's the other one? The drawbore tenon. So you're going to be thinking about one of those two applications. So that is my long spiel. I want to start getting into some of the answers. What particular methods do you have, or what things would you like me to talk through?
Okay, well, first of all, Alan has a super chat.
Alan, my man! What's he have?
Well, he says Coco Elf Fun.
Oh, he wants a mom joke.
A mom joke. But you stole my book.
I stole the book. Here, let me throw it at you.
Oh, I was just going to come stand by you.
Oh, okay. Oh, you want to be in the spotlight too?
I'll be in the spotlight tonight.
Okay.
Oh, there you go. Better.
And this way you guys can actually see her actual height.
Because we just needed to clarify that a little.
Yeah, I have to say, a lot of people really get worried about using the right joint or picking a bad joint. And once you understand the basic mechanics, you can kind of think through it, and you realize there is no right or wrong joint. There are joints that work better in some cases and joints that work better in other cases. And once you know the mechanical advantage, you can oftentimes come up with a joint that has already been made. And I've done that a few times where I'm like, ooh, this works really well to do it this way. And then I go, oh yeah, someone's already talked through that. What you got?
I think this is a good one. Husband, what are you doing? You've been reading our marriage certificate for an hour. Wife, I'm looking for the expiration date.
I thought you were looking for the loophole. So, what questions do you have? What joints do you want me to talk through?
Give me a second.
Oh, you've got questions already? Okay. This is one of these topics where I could probably do an entire entire Q&A just on these, because I get questions all the time of, I'm doing this and this, which joint should I use? And yeah, I like being able to answer those questions and say, this is the joint that I would probably use. But most of the time I like to actually explain why to use that joint rather than specifically, this is the joint to use, because then it helps people understand the reason behind it, so in the future they can help answer their own question. So what we got?
Okay, hang on.
I'm hanging.
Digimer asks, could you drill a hole down through the finger joints and run a dowel down it to lock the joints?
Yes.
If you happen to not trust the glue.
Yep. And actually, one of the things that I've been thinking through, because I do what I call show tails, because you see it occasionally where people will rotate the dovetails on a dresser front, because normally on a dresser you have half blind dovetails, so when you look at it from the front you don't see the dovetails. Well, I like to see the dovetails, but the problem is if you put the dovetails on correctly, then it just looks like finger joints on the front, and that just doesn't look very good. So I actually want to see the dovetails, and so that's why I call them show tails. But the problem with that is that then you're not using the mechanical advantage of the joint. So what you could do is you could put a pin down through them all and hold them together. Or what I'm actually wanting to do, I have a set of drawers coming up that I'm actually going to try this on, is I want to put a brass pin through this way. So I'm going to put it through the pin and into the main body. And in doing so, I'm going to actually have that brass pin stick out a little bit past the side and use that as the drawer stop so that the drawer can't go in any farther because of the pin there. And actually do like 1, 2, 3 pins on the end of each one. So those stick out a little bit past the side. Something I want to play with. I haven't quite figured out if I want to do that, but yeah, putting a pin through it is the best way. If you're ever worried about glue, failing, the answer is either a dovetail or a pin. That's it. And dovetail is something very wide, as in it's always wider on the outside and shorter on the inside, whether it's actually a dovetail or some weird shape that is wider on the outside than on the inside. And that's what a dovetail is. Like on a wedged tenon, you're making a dovetail. You're just making it after it's been put together. You're making a tenon and turning that tenon into a dovetail. What's next?
I was just thinking of a great intro if you ever do another dovetail movie.
Oh, woo! Danger.
You can
Children
tell
of the
what
90s.
generation we are from. Sorry, it popped in my head when you were talking and I couldn't get it out. All right, let's see. Judith Katz asked, is there a disadvantage in pinning finger joints top to bottom?
No. No. It'd be the same top to bottom or bottom to top, I guess. I guess the only difference would be, do you go all the way through all of the finger joints? If you stop just before going out the bottom side, then you have gravity holding the pin in place. So if glue on the pin dies out, then it won't go out. But then you're just like way overthinking it. And it really wouldn't make much difference one way or the other. So, yeah. What's next?
Let's see. JB Tallullah asked, thanks for the help on the curly quarter sawn white oak with the card scraper. It worked great. Now, which epoxy and where do you get it for when the dovetails don't fit right on this bench?
Epoxy is great for filling joints. It is a great gap filler. Epoxy actually works over a larger space than wood glue often will. But as to which type of epoxy, so far in most of my texts, I've found that most epoxies are relatively close together in quality and strength. I use West System epoxy a lot. I've also used Total Boat's epoxy quite a bit. And I found both those to be very, very similar. They are expensive up front, but it's more or less an investment because you're buying a gallon and a half worth of epoxy that for most people will last many years into the future. And it really doesn't go bad. So it's not something to worry about. But yeah, if you have the money, buy something like West System or Total Boat. If you don't, then get a good 5-minute epoxy and be just as happy with that. Or get like a 30-minute epoxy. Give yourself some working time.
Ready?
Yeah.
Blue Kestral asks, speaking of long grain to long grain, in a cutting board, would regular wood glue or hide glue be better because of the water?
I wouldn't use either of them in a cutting board. Hide glue, the moment you put water on it, will come loose. Most PVAs will eventually come loose as well. Even like the waterproof Type Bond 3, direct water will weaken it and it will come apart eventually. So I would not use that. For water conditions, I generally use epoxy. And I know a lot of people are really going to start screaming, it's a cutting board, don't use epoxy. Once it's cured, it's fine. Don't worry about it. You got to draw the line wherever you have it. But for my cutting board, I would use epoxy for it. That being said, I'm doing a glue test right now. Do I have the glues over here? Oh, here it is. And I just finished doing the exterior water, and I was absolutely blown away. I mean, I've used plastic resin, Weld-Bond plastic resin a few times, but I was really, really blown away with its exterior condition. Yeah, that's what I'm really looking forward to showing, because I'll be doing the glue test, the new glue test video here. But the plastic resin did very, very well in water conditions.
So was that spoilers?
What's that?
Was that spoilers?
I guess.
You are supposed to warn spoilers. I can't do my job when he doesn't warn me.
Oh, is that a super chat?
There is a super chat. I was trying to get your attention.
Hey, Shawn.
Do you want me to read it to you?
Yeah.
It says, great show. I choose joints for beauty in my pieces, and I suspect many do the same. Are there any joints to avoid because function is inadequate? And what is the situation that joint should be avoided?
No, I mean, there's no joint that is bad. It has no use. I mean, even like the simple butt joint where you run two boards together and you glue them into place. There are places where I've done that. And small items where the expansion and contraction is not huge and don't have a lot of force on them, I've just stuck two pieces together and hit them with super glue and they're done. That's all you need, and that is probably the most basic, worthless joint, is just a simple butt joint. And so there really is no bad joint. Every joint has a place where it works really well and other places where it doesn't work so well. And they can get really pretty, from like the sunrise dovetail to the houndstooth dovetail to just a simple quick whipped up dovetail to just a basic finger joint. They all have their place and purpose. It's on a continuum of how do they look from one side to the other, how well do they hold stuff together from one side to the other, how quick and easy are they to make. Every joint is going to fall at a different point on that continuum. And because of that, you have different joints that work well in different situations. So there really isn't a bad joint that you should really avoid in all situations. Just understand that if I have a simple butt joint and I'm doing them cross grain, over time that glue is probably going to shear due to expansion and contraction, especially if it's on a larger piece. Now if it's on a small little piece, expansion and contraction is not a big problem because the expansion and contraction is minuscule. But if it's on a tabletop, a butt joint is not a good place to use that. So I think that's the way I just do it. Think through the joint rather than just picking a joint for its looks. But yeah, good question.
I keep seeing a spinning circle, so I don't know if we're having a slow.
Maybe
upload.
Different in different places. Is it showing a spinning circle on ours?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, then our internet connection is slowing.
So sorry if you guys are noticing that. All right. We're waiting to hear back from Shawn if he wants a mom joke or a dad joke. So we will not
Let us know, Shawn.
decide. Either is fine. Okay, I have one.
What's that?
So this is my usual response to people when they're like, hey, you're short. And I'm like, thank you. I'm not short. I just have a fear of heights.
She's travel size, for my convenience.
Just creepy when I say it to other people.
What's the next question?
Okay, hang on. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in the chat.
Oh yeah, before we get to this, if anyone has any particular instance, like I had someone asking about a table leg going into a tabletop, if you have a particular instance you want me to talk to, go ahead and put it in there. Just describe it well enough so that we can actually visualize it. What you got?
Sorry. Geoffrey Murphy asked, do you glue a sliding dovetail or would that prohibit the movement?
Well, yes and no. In this case where I have the sliding dovetail going cross grain, I'm probably going to put a little bit of glue at one point or the other. And I believe I did that on this one. The edge where it's flush, I put some glue right there and I left the rest of it open to move. And that way it's not going to be moving there. And most of the time you try and put the glue in the middle, but as you slide the dovetail through, that means that half of it is going to be glued up. And so it's kind of one of those things that it's hard to do. And if you put the glue just on one side, then that means all the expansion and contraction is on the other end. So it depends on what you're looking for. But I normally do put a point of glue, but I don't glue the whole thing. If you glue the whole thing, then you might come into problems where you weaken the board. And in most houses where they're air conditioned, that's not going to be that big an issue. If it is something in a non-air conditioned space or something that's outside, then expansion and contraction is really big, and you have to think about that a lot. And I've seen boards that have been, 5-6 years in like a garage or someplace where they're getting the full humidity swings, where if that was glued all the way across over a 2-foot span, the board would actually crack and break apart vertically, and you'd actually see these cracks developing in the board vertically on the grain as it's trying to expand and contract, but can't because it's glued in place. So yeah, don't glue the whole thing just in one place. Or, and most of the time, with a sliding dovetail, you really don't need glue. It holds itself in place, and if it does get out of place, then you just tap it back where it should be. If it's a good tight joint, it takes a good bit of force to move it around, so it's not something to worry about too much. So, yeah, good question. What? You okay?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to spell a word.
What we got next?
There, I think I got it. Poorman asked, since you brought up mechanical advantage, Where would the mechanical advantage of a Knapp joint be?
A Knapp joint is exactly the same thing as a dovetail. It functions, and in reality, where are these dovetails? It has absolutely no difference in other than a dovetail. Let me switch over and show you this. If you think about them in physical conditions, in this case, both of these boards are held in place. This plate cannot go off this way at all. But on both of these, this plate can go off this way and this plate can go off this way. So functionally, they are the same. In strength testing, it really depends on the wood, because in this case, these pins, these 3 pins, are what are holding this board from coming out this way. So how strong is the total collection of those 3 pins? On a dovetail, it's the material just on this side of the tail, just on this side of the tail, just on this side of the tail, and just on this side of the tail. So if I had to assume, I would actually assume that the dovetail is slightly stronger from the board pulling out this way than this one. But in all honesty, both of these, if you have something pulling hard enough to try and pull this board out this way, you're going to be breaking something else somewhere in the board, because this board won't hold it in place that well. So functionally and strength-wise, these two are absolutely identical in the way they go. The reason the Knapp joint came out is they created the Knapp machine, which would do this as a machine. And it went from one person being able to do a few dozen dovetails a day to being able to do a few hundred dovetails a day. And so they had a machine that could do this before they had a machine that could do this. And then when they got a machine that could do this, they no longer needed the machine that could do this. And so these then disappeared. And so that's one of the ways you can actually date some furniture. If you find a piece of furniture with this joint, it came from around 1880 to around the turn of the century. That's when you started seeing these disappearing. So the Knapp joint, though it looks cool, is absolutely no different from a dovetail. It's just looks different. So yeah, hope that answers your question. What's next?
Let's see. Airyn asked, what do you think might be the best time to use castle joints?
I don't know what a castle joint is. I think you may be talking about houndstooth dovetails. And that's one of the things that every joint is going to have like 6 or 7 names, and different names from different places. A houndstooth looks like this. And it's basically a dovetail inside of a dovetail. And I have a live video cutting this one out. And functionally, it's absolutely identical to a regular dovetail. There is, just like with a Knapp joint, there is no difference in how these come out. This board can't come out this way. Strength-wise, it's almost identical to a regular dovetail. So I mean, it's just more about how does it look. I mean, do you like this look, or do you like this look? I mean, functionally, it's the exact same as a dovetail. It's just the look. That's the only difference. I'm assuming that's what you mean by the castle. What we got?
Ready. So, ow.
Did I hurt you?
No, I whacked it on the desk. Did I hurt you?
And you're talking about me banging my head on a wall.
But I want to know how you hurt me from all the way over there. I have conditioned you to assume you have hurt me when I say ow. Sorry. That was kind of maniacal. Anyways, I wanted to ask, there was a question to follow up the houndstooth dovetail. Oh, Mr. Q. I love the houndstooth dovetail. What are their best function, pros, cons, and have you ever done an inlaid houndstooth dovetail?
I have never done an inlaid houndstooth dovetail. That sounds really interesting, really cool, but a lot of work. Anytime you make an inlaid dovetail, you're basically making the dovetail joint twice and doing it with an added amount of detail. So an inlaid houndstooth dovetail would be detail upon detail, but it would look really cool. Yeah, maybe I'll have to try that sometime. I mean, as going back to where would you use it, any place you would use a dovetail, you could also do a houndstooth. It just depends on, do you want the look of that as opposed to the look of a dovetail. So exactly the same. But okay, now I have to do an inlaid houndstooth sometime. We'll see.
Live.
Yes.
All right. So we have a super chat, and then I have clarification on the castle joint. So Shawn OBrien asked, are there joints that are better made with greenwood that wind up stronger after they dry?
In some cases, yes. I have actually, when doing Windsor chairs, what they'll have is a round tenon going through a round hole. And so what they'll do is they'll have a green seat or a green hole that it goes through, or at least wet. And then they'll take the tenon and they'll put it in a heat box and dry it out. And what that'll do is it'll shrink the tenon. The tenon goes down smaller, and then the seat is still wet. And so when you put that tenon in there, the tenon will expand over time, and the seat will shrink over time. And so the seat then squeezes down on that tenon, and that tenon will expand a little bit. And once those go in there and the two of them become equilibrium, that joint will not come apart. It is crushed into place and held down tight. And so in that case, yes, because it's green, it's bigger than it needs to be, and as it shrinks, it will constrict down on the tenon. And so that's usually the most common way you do that. Most of the time, you want the two pieces to be at equilibrium. You want them to have the same moisture content, so when they go together, the expansion and contractions are the same rate at the same time. So yeah, that would be a good question. So thank you.
Well, and then now he has requested a dad joke, but I realized I stole your joke book.
Oh, is that?
Do you trust me to throw it at you?
I don't trust you to throw it at me. Last time you tried to throw something, you hit my camera.
The stream is starting to choke up now.
Yep, sorry. It's either our internet connection or the server's side. It is the fun of live videos.
We'll say.
Let's see, what do we got? Teaching my daughter to ride a bike. The hardest part of riding a bike is the pavement.
Okay, that's actually kind of funny.
What do we got?
No. The hardest part of learning to ride a bike is learning to ride a bike on gravel. Pavement is easy compared to gravel in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. Anyways, I don't have scars to prove it. I can't ride a bike to save my life anyways.
What's the next question?
Hang on. I was reading the comments. Okay, so I have clarification for the castle joke from Airyn. Or castle joint, not joke. Knock, knock, who's there? A castle joint looks like the crenellations on top of a castle wall, like finger joint side by side. And then Mike V clarified, castle joints are basically modified mortise and tenon/lap joints.
I will have to go look that up. I haven't seen
Okay.
the term, so I don't know what you're talking about. That's what I was thinking about with the houndstooth, is it looks kind of like the crenellations on a castle. But yeah. What's the next question?
Dennis Meko asked, is one glue better than another for joints?
Oh, yes. And it's not about the joint particularly, it's about the application. How gappy is the joint? Is it going to be under a lot of stress? Is it going to be outside? Is it going to be two different woods against each other? Is one of them oily? Is one of them dry? And there are lots of things like that. And I have, on the main channel, I have the Great Glue Test. If you search for on YouTube, The Great Glue Test, you'll come up against the video. And I went through 32 different glues and actually did some comparisons one to the other and came to quite a few conclusions. I will be having a video coming out hopefully Thursday. Cross my fingers as long as I can get it all done. I have all of the results in. I'm just crunching the data, and so hopefully I can get that out Thursday. If not, it will be next Thursday, where I'll actually be going through a whole nother set of 32 glues and talking through where to use those in comparison. So yes, 99% of the time in the shop I'm using Titebond 2. I use Titebond 2 over Titebond 3 because Titebond 2 is much cheaper, easier to get. I can buy it in the gallon jug, and that'll last me for a year or so, depending upon what I'm making. And if I'm going to be outside, or if it's something that is going to be under a lot of stress, I'm going to be using epoxy. Although testing the plastic, I'm probably going to start working that into my mixture now. I also use a lot of super glues. A lot of people really poo-poo the 2P tins and super glues like that, but in small applications and little pieces, they are surprisingly good. Especially if you work them up well. And I do that a lot for, oops, I broke something, let's glue it back together and continue working. There are a lot of places that I've started working those in. But those are most of my glues. A good PVA wood glue, an epoxy, and then super glue are what I do most of the time. So yeah. What? You're smiling.
So yes, John Juggler threw up a super chat that says, "Great show, keep it going."
Oh, thanks, John.
And you stole my mom joke book.
Well, this one needs a dad joke then. So thank you, John.
John,
Today you get...
he's not letting me. He is naughty.
No.
The yes. Now inquiring minds want to know.
For those of you in Europe, here you go. Did you hear about the haunted French pancakes? They'll give you the crepes.
I would have picked a better one.
That makes me happy.
You should have picked the one you were laughing at earlier.
Yeah, I probably should have. I have to demonetize the video. What's next?
Hang on.
Got enough time for a couple more?
Okay, hang on. Let me see how many I have already done. I have like 5 more.
No, Sarah's jokes are better.
That's right. That's right.
5 more? Okay. Well, if we don't get to your joke, then if we don't get to your question, I'm sorry. But we will answer super chats. So, do you really want it?
I don't know. I think we should keep going as long as the super chats keep rolling. All right. Mackenzie asked, "What would be the strongest joint to use without any glue?"
You're really looking for something with mechanical advantage. Then, like I try and do all of my furniture construction, I want it to be held together in a way that doesn't need any glue. Like my bed, other than the little corbels holding things up, I didn't need to use any glue because all of the tenons were pinned, and everything else was captured in such a way as a dovetail or a pin. On my table upstairs, there's a 400-pound top holding everything down, so I could use gravity holding things together. So the half-lap joints that sister over things aren't going to come loose because you have to pull them up to get them off. So there's a lot of understanding how does gravity hold something together. So gravity is going to hold it in place for you, in which case you don't need any glue. Or is there a mechanical something holding it together like a pin or a dovetail, so you don't need any glue there. And one of the things about dovetail joints is if you were to make a drawer with really nice dovetails, you wouldn't need to use any glue on it because the dresser would hold the sides in place, so the sides wouldn't come off, and the mechanical advantage of the dovetail would keep the front and back onto the drawer. So you just have to think through the particular application, what is holding it in place, and do you need any glue in that joint? And most of the time, even if I don't need glue, like a drawbore, mortise, and tenon, you don't need any glue in a drawbore, mortise, and tenon, but I still put glue in there because I'm an idiot. Because why not? I mean, it's really not going to hurt anything, so put some glue in there. But do I need it? No. So, yeah. What's next?
Let's see. Aubreykun said, "What would you use in situations where the joints are being subject to lots of stress or vibration, like a trailer/cart, swing set, or something that has to support a motor?"
In that case, I really want to try and make the joinery so it doesn't need the glue, and the glue is just the backup connection. So the joinery will hold it together with or without glue, but then the glue is there for the extra support. And if saying a trailer or a motor, anytime I'm working with something outside, my brain immediately goes to epoxy. And most epoxies are going to be far better at the general absorption of shock or moisture changes or flexibilities. Epoxy is a really, really good glue for most applications like that. But that being said, the plastic resin, I haven't done a whole lot of testing for that. It's one of the next things I want to do is test the flexibility of different glues as well as the longevity of different glues. So that's something that I don't really know as much about as I would like. But my brain usually goes epoxy, use epoxy. So yeah. What's next?
Let's see. Lawrence Bassett asked, is there a timber frame analog of the jointer's window?
You could make one. No matter what you're doing, there are 1,000 different ways to do a joint. And one of the things, if you look up a joinery window, you're going to see them with a whole bunch of different joints in each place. And you'll see, and one of the interesting things about the joinery window is there are several traditions in the woodworking world where this was one of the tasks that someone would have to do from going from an apprentice to a journeyman. Is they'd have to do something like this. And there are lists of different joinery windows like this that would have a set of joints that they would do. And there are several different lists with several different joints. So could you do one with timber framing? Sure. Just think through it and find 9 different joints that you could put together in an orientation and make one. But no, I've never done anything like that. It sounds like a lot of fun with several large pieces of wood that you'd have to work together. That'd be enjoyable. And timber framing is all about putting pegs in joints because glue just is not going to do anything on that big a surface. So it's got to be something that's mechanically functional. So you get a lot of dovetails and a lot of pins, and that's just the answer to it. And then gravity, of course, because, well, gravity holds things together really well. What's next?
Let's see. Rocky Mountain Bear asked, my grandfather had a stack of 1 by 2 by 32 inch boards with an open dovetail running through the whole thing. Any ideas what they could have been for?
They could have been drawer sides. If there's a dovetail running all the way down the length of a board, it sounds like it was a slide used for something. They'd be very common for like expanding tables where you'd have the sliding dovetails slide past each other but hold strength the whole way, as well as it was common to have drawers with a sliding dovetail, and the sliding dovetail would keep the drawer on track, sort of like a drawer slide, as well as keeping it from moving out of place. Those are the 2 things that really come to mind, but who knows? Sounds like it was a project that was going to happen but never did. Got enough time for one more? One more, maybe 2?
I have 2.
We'll see.
Aubreykun asked, can you talk about timber framing versus cabinetry joints? I feel like there's not a lot talked about the differences between them and where they cross over.
That's because there really isn't any difference. It's still joinery. It's the exact same joinery from one to the other. All timber framing joints could be used in furniture building, and all furniture building joints could be used in timber framing. And it's the exact same thing. It's mortise and tenon. It's drawboard mortise and tenon. It's mitered sliding joints. It's half-lap joints. They're just bigger, and they have different names because it's a different tradition, and different people were doing them, so they were all named something different. But they're the exact same thing. They're just different methodologies of the same method. Just like you would have, 6 different dovetail joints that all look slightly different. They're all mechanically the same joint. Exact same thing when you get into timber framing. Wood is wood. It works the exact same whether it's big or small. And you can use the exact same joints on the big pieces as you would on making a desk or a table. So, same thing, just bigger. One more joke?
Okay.
One more joke?
Bring us a joke. Anyways, I don't know if this is kind of on topic, but it's the last question that came up. Mike V asked, did you reinforce your floor joists?
For the table, no. And if you really think about it, I had a lot of people ask me this question because the table's around 600 pounds. And so people are like, wow, 600 pounds, that's a lot of people, a lot of weight. But in all honesty, it's like 3 people standing there. So 3 grown guys standing in the living room is the same weight as my table. So 600 pounds sounds like a lot, but when you think about it in comparison to what the floor is designed to hold, the table is only like 10% of the weight when everyone's sitting around the table. So no, I don't need to reinforce my floor for the table. And it's 2 by 6s, 16 on center, spanning 10 feet. 2 by 10s, 16 on center, spanning 10 feet, and it is far stronger than it needs to be. So, yeah. But I don't know why people really, the idea of a 600-pound table, that is just massive. That's got to be way outside the strength of a floor, but it's 3 guys standing. And if you think about the table is spread out over 13 feet, so the table is crossing, what is that, for 12 joists-ish, something like that. No, 11 joists. So the table is spanning 11 joists with 600 pounds. So that means it's putting, 40 pounds per joist, which is absolutely nothing. So no reason to reinforce the floor. That's one of those things where you just have to think through, because I mean, it looks like it, and when you initially say 600-pound table, you're thinking, wow, there's some structural loads here. But when you actually do the math and think about it, it's really not any significant weight on the floor itself. So, good question, but I've been asked that question a lot. Cool. Well, I think that'll about do it. So if anyone has anything else that I didn't get to, please send me a message. Also, if you have any information on going to the peach meet or one of those, let me know, and maybe we will make that happen. So, I don't know. We'll see how that goes. So I think that'll about do it. Anything I'm forgetting?
No, cool. But poor man wants to know if you're entering the Katz Moses Dovetail Challenge.
We'll see. We'll see. I don't know.
Oh! Someone's trying to take Alan's role, Mr.
What?
Q. Here is a joke, question mark. If Sarah sits in the workbench, I think on the workbench, is she then the woodshop elf on the shelf?
The answer is yes, because she sees all that happens and she reports it.
You think you're Santa?
On that note, thanks for coming. It was a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to next week. If I get this done in time, we'll be starting the tote next week, but it won't be until after Christmas. So stay tuned for that. If you have anything you'd like me to do for a live video, I'd love to hear that. So I think that'll about do it for now. And until next time, have a magical day.
Have a magical...
Oh, that's the ending from my other channel.
I was going to say,
have a wonderful day. Try that one.
It's magic.
I'm still waving.
Anyway, I'm going to keep making you wave. It was fun tonight. Bye, guys.